Hello, this is Ukraine on Air. My name is Christina Stricher with the latest news. On the 2nd of April, the liberation of the Kyiv region from Russian troops was announced. The retreat of the enemy forces around Kyiv left horrendous evidence of atrocities against civilians. Such a deliberate massacre turned the Ukrainian town of Bucha into the 21st century Srebrenica.
Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Hanna Malar, reported that the Kyiv region has already been liberated from Russian troops. In the territories retaken by the armed forces of Ukraine, the mine threat remains acute. According to Oleksiy Kuleba, head of the humanitarian staff of the Kyiv region, it will take at least 10 days to eliminate it. The mayor of Bucha, which was liberated in the Kyiv region, reported a large number of civilian casualties in the town as a result of the Russian occupation. Dozens of dead people in civilian clothes lie in the streets of Bucha, some of them with their hands tied. About 300 people are buried in a mass grave. The naked bodies of 4 or 5 women were found on a road near Kyiv. The Russian soldiers tried to burn them. In Motyzhin, the bodies of the town mayor Olga Sukhenko and her husband, who had been abducted by the Russian military on the 23rd of March, were found after the village was liberated. Ukraine will convene a special meeting of the UN Security Council. In response to these atrocities, Russia deserves nothing less than total isolation. The civilized world should have nothing in common with barbarians and murderers of women and children.
Heavy shelling and missile attacks, primarily against civilian infrastructure and bases of storage of fuels and lubricants, continue in Ukrainian cities, including Odesa, a strategic Black Sea port.
Russian troops launched missile strikes on a military facility in the Dnipropetrovsk region. An administrative building and a fuel depot were destroyed. Valentin Reznichenko, the head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Military Administration, reported that 2 people were killed and 5 wounded. As a result of a rocket fire in the Pavlohrad district of Dnipropetrovsk region, the railway lines were damaged. Dmytro Lunin, head of the Poltava Regional Military Administration, announced rocket attacks on the infrastructure of Mirgorod. As a result of the shelling, the runway and infrastructure of the local airfield were damaged. A fire broke out at a fuel and lubricants warehouse. He also reported that an oil refinery and fuel and lubricant depots were destroyed as a result of the Russian strike on Kremenchuk in the morning of the 2nd of April. The head of the Odesa Regional Military Administration, Maxim Marchenko, stated that Russian troops fired several Iskander missiles at a settlement in the Odesa region, and there were casualties. On the 3rd and 4th of April, Russian troops launched airstrikes on Odesa, and some of the missiles were shot down by air defense forces. On the 3rd of April, Russian forces shelled the city of Vasylkiv in the Kyiv region. Rockets hit the military headquarters building, which had already been destroyed in early March. Several people were injured.
The Russian military is retreating in Chernihiv and Sumy, but fierce fighting occurs in the Kharkiv and Luhansk regions.
Russian troops are concentrating forces to try to encircle Ukrainian units in the area of the Joint Forces operation and reach the administrative borders of the Luhansk and Donetsk regions. The main battles are taking place in Mariupol, in the Izum area and on the outskirts of Severodonetsk. The hottest spot in the Kharkiv region remains Izum, around which hostilities continue. Russian troops hold part of the city and pontoon crossings across the Siversky Donets river. According to the General Staff, they cannot move further south and east. In the Luhansk region, Russian troops continue to attack the towns of Popasna and Rubizhne. Russian aircraft and artillery strike in Rubizhne, Kremenna, Lysychansk and Severodonetsk.
There are kidnappings of officials in the Kherson region. Russia had hoped for a Crimean scenario and widespread collaboration, but received protests instead.
Residents of temporarily occupied Kherson continue to hold peaceful pro-Ukrainian demonstrations. In the city, citizens gathered near the monument to Taras Shevchenko for a peaceful rally against Russian aggression. They chanted, "Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes, glory to the soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces," and other patriotic slogans. The demonstration participants say that they do not want Russian power in the Kherson region. Ukrainian citizens under occupation are also protesting in the regional population centers. For instance, the residents of Hola Pristan came out to the demonstration, calling for the release of the local mayor and other citizens abducted by Russian troops. Residents of the temporarily occupied city of Enerhodar, Zaporizhzhia region, gathered on the 2nd of April for pro-Ukrainian demonstrations. The Russian military used weapons, including mortars, against the protesters. Among the locals are wounded and detained.
The human cost of Russia's war in Ukraine continues to grow. From the onset of the Russian invasion to midnight on the 2nd of April 2022, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights recorded 3,455 civilian casualties in the country, 1,417 killed, and 2,038 injured. Mariupol and Volnovakha, Izium, Popasna, Irpin, and other populated areas where intense hostilities have been going are not included in the estimate. According to the Center for International Security, 455 civilians were killed from the 31st of March to the morning of the 4th of April. This number includes the preliminary official data about 280 victims in Bucha. 200 people were wounded, 18 civilians were captured, and a total of over 100 civilians were kidnapped or taken captive. This information does not take into account all casualties in the regions where active combat operations are taking place. Russia's war crimes against Ukraine have been committed since the first days of the invasion. The Russian occupiers have been killing, kidnapping, and torturing not only Ukrainian journalists, politicians, and public activists, but also religious leaders.
Currently, 5 killings and 5 abductions have been confirmed. There is no communication with several priests in the combat zone. The available evidence of shootings and kidnappings of priests in Kyiv, Donetsk, Kherson, Odesa, and Zaporizhzhia regions are striking with their brutality and cynicism. On the 23rd of March, during the evacuation from Irpin, Kyiv region, Volodymyr Bormashev, a priest of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in unity with the Moscow Patriarchate, was seriously injured and died in hospital on the 28th of March. In the temporarily occupied cities, Russian special services kidnapped Orthodox priests, especially the representatives of the autocephalous Orthodox Church of Ukraine. On the 14th of March, the priest from Berdyansk, Zaporizhzhia region, Oleg Nikolaev, was kidnapped. On the 30th of March, the Russians abducted the priest Serhiy Chudinovich in Kherson. However, the next day, the priest of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Dnipro was abducted and detained for several days. According to the Ukraine on Fire experts, no public religious leader can feel safe in the temporarily occupied cities unless they express strong loyalty to the occupation administration.
The second exchange of prisoners of war took place. After the return of the heroes defenders of the Zmyiny Island, 86 more Ukrainian soldiers returned home.
The prisoner exchange held in Zaporizhzhia region on the 1st of April resulted in the release of 86 Ukrainian servicemen. According to Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk, one of the principal positions of the Ukrainian side was the inclusion of 15 female soldiers in the group of prisoners of war that were exchanged. Previously, on the 24th of March, the Ukrainian authorities conducted an exchange of prisoners of war in the format of 10 to 10. In addition, 19 crew members of the rescue ship Sapphire, captured by Russian occupants, were rescued. Ukrainian authorities also exchanged 9 Russian conscripts for the captured mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov, who had been kidnapped on the 11th of March.
The city of Mariupol is nearly destroyed. According to the head of the Donetsk Regional Administration, 120,000 people still remained in the encircled city.
Of the 450,000 population in Mariupol, which is constantly under attack of Russian forces, 120,000 still remain in the city. About 90% of the city is destroyed, as reported by Pavlohrad, the head of Donetsk Regional Administration. According to him, as of the 23rd of March, 82,000 people left Mariupol through the humanitarian corridor. Another 53 buses with people are now trying to reach the city of Zaporizhzhia. He added that more than 30,000 people had been forcibly deported by the Russians to the territory of the Russian Federation and to the territory not controlled by Ukraine.
The Russian-Ukrainian war resulted in a 35% increase in world oil prices. In response, the United States and more than 30 countries have agreed to release dozens of millions of additional barrels of oil from their strategic reserves.
On the 31st of March, the President of the United States, Joseph Biden, announced that around 1 million barrels of oil would be released each day from the U.S. Strategic Oil Reserve on the international market during the next 6 months. The current release of oil from the U.S. Strategic Reserve is the largest in American history. The government also cooperates with American oil companies to increase oil production. Biden added that oil prices would depend significantly on how much oil American allies would agree to release from their strategic reserves. He supposes that they would be able to release from 30 to 50 million barrels. Russia exports 7.5 million of barrels of oil a day. In case of reduction or cessation of Russian oil on the world market, can only be offset by increased production in countries such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE, as well as the use of strategic reserves of developed countries.
Russia's blockade of Ukraine's harbors in the Black Sea violates global food security as it significantly reduces grain exports from Ukraine.
At a press conference on the 31st of March, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg stated, "Black Sea and the harbors of Ukraine are key for the export of grain and food to the rest of the world." So the Russian blockade of Ukrainian ports is not only a big problem for Ukraine, but it is a problem for people all over the world, and it's causing a spike, a high increase in the food prices all over the world. So it is extremely important that this blockage ends and that Ukraine again is really allowed to export grain into the world market to feed people and to reduce prices of food globally. If Ukraine fails to unblock ports or establish grain exports by rail, some countries in North Africa and the Middle East are at risk of starvation.
The President of the European Parliament came to Kyiv personally to meet with the Ukrainian leaders. Roberta Metsola is the first leader of a major EU institution to visit Ukraine since the Russian assault began on the 21st of February.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, in Kyiv. The politicians discussed the coordination of European parliaments in support of Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky thanked Roberta Metsola for supporting Ukraine during the war. He later noted that her decision to visit the Ukrainian capital during the war was a heroic step. In turn, the EU official declared that Ukraine is part of the European family, adding that Ukraine's victory would mean victory for the whole world.
Russia has blocked the continuation of the special monitoring mission of the OSCE to Ukraine. It is an unarmed civilian mission that has been impartially observing the situation in Ukraine since 2014.
The mandate of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine, which had been operating in the country since 2014, has been terminated due to the position of the Russian Federation. According to OSCE head and Polish Foreign Minister Zbigniew Rau, OSCE member states are now pursuing the goal of continuing consultations on the organization's further role and presence in Ukraine. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry commented on the Russian position as follows. The blocking of the mission's mandate confirms Moscow's conscious choice in favor of further waging an aggressive war against Ukraine. The ministry believes that Russia will not be able to evade responsibility for the crimes committed in Ukraine.
News about Russia's aggression in Ukraine has dominated the world's media for more than a month. After all, a large-scale war in the heart of Europe is fraught with serious consequences for the global security architecture.
The Economist, an authoritative British periodical, published an article Why Ukraine Must Win, with an image of Volodymyr Zelensky on the cover of its latest issue on the 2nd of April. The key message of the piece is the belief that Ukraine's victory in the war is a historic chance for Europe to strengthen its own security. A strong democratic Ukraine would thwart Russia's expansionism because its borders would be secure. Still, the Western countries' refusal to provide Ukraine with more weapons, planes and tanks to confront Russia demonstrates their failure of strategic vision. Zelensky calls the current restrained position of the US, Germany and France on supplying heavy weapons to Ukraine as short-sighted or timorous. And the authors of the article concur with him. Ukraine has won the first phase of this one simply by surviving. Now it needs to advance, and so Mr. Zelensky needs redoubled Western help.
The UK and other partners have committed to stepping up military assistance to Ukraine to help the war-affected country defend against Russian aggression.
British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace announced that London and its allies are discussing expanding support for Ukraine. It is a question of providing lethal weapons, including air and coastal defence systems, long-range artillery and countermeasures, as well as training and logistics support. Australia decided to provide assistance worth $91 million, including $18.7 million in addition defense military assistance to the armed forces of Ukraine. The German Defense Ministry has decided to authorize the delivery of about 60 infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine, which were formerly in service with the German Democratic Republic's army and are in the Czech Republic at the present time. The US Department of Defense has agreed to provide Ukraine with an additional package of military assistance worth $300 million. In particular, we are talking about the transfer of unmanned aerial vehicles, machine guns and tactical protected communication systems to the Ukrainian armed forces.
Stand with Free Ukraine and subscribe for our channel.